Hi, my name's Colin Eberhardt. I'm the CTO of Scott Logic. We're a UK-based software consultancy doing all kinds of things, but today I'm going to be talking to you about AI because I think it's quite exciting. From my perspective, generative AI is touching almost every aspect of our business lives and our personal lives. Models are becoming more powerful, they're showing greater promise, but my feeling is there's a gap emerging between the promise that we see and the results that we're actually delivering. There are astonishing experiments and demos, but quite often they're not being turned into something reliable that we can trust and use in our day-to-day lives. That's what I want to talk about. And I'm also going to apologize for the AI-generated image. I did what everyone does. I took the text of my title, put it into DALL-E, and that's slightly hideous, I'm going to say. Image is what it came up with. The idea that making GenAI a tool for everyone means we all plug into the AI. That's the last GenAI image you're going to see. So in this talk, I'm going to tackle a few questions that have been on my mind. So firstly, what has made GenAI such a disruptive technology? I think there are some interesting features that are quite notable and quite different when we look at other technology disruption. Then I'm going to ask the question, has GenAI delivered on this promise? I think you'll probably guess the answer's no or not yet. And then I want to talk about why this is such a unique challenge. In better understanding the challenges, we might be able to deliver on the promises that we are making ourselves or we hear around us. And then finally, I want to go into a little bit more detail. One of the biggest challenges I see is the path from prototype to production. That's where we turn promises into reality. So starting at the beginning, what has made generative AI such a disruptive technology? Now, I've been in software for, I guess, the past 25 years. I've seen all kinds of tech trends come and go, some successful, some less so. I've seen broken promises, blockchain, and I've seen things turn into genuine value. Sorry if anyone's into blockchain. Some things turn into genuine value, like the internet or the mobile phone. I think GenAI is posed to be a real disruptive force. I don't think this is going to be one of the hype technologies that in 5 years' time we'll turn around and go, God, why were we wasting our time with that? And there are a few reasons. AI has been around for years, but there's some notable differences with generative AI. I think the first one is that we now have general-purpose AI models. Historically, AI models have had architectures that are tailored to specific use cases. They've been fed with data for specific use cases, whether it's sentiment analysis, translation. Now we have general-purpose AI models where if you want it to do a translation, you say, can you please translate this? If you want sentiment analysis, you just ask. That's a significant step change. The next is we have human language APIs. So historically, to use an AI model, you typically either had to be a Python developer or befriend a Python developer. And they're quite nice people, so that's OK. But now we can all use it because the API itself is human language. So these two aspects alone have caused a significant surge in the capability of AI. But it goes a little bit further. The reasoning capabilities, and this is something that's been called an emergent behavior. These generative AI models were not developed to be reasoning engines. However, we have discovered that to a certain extent, they can make smart decisions. I should probably air quote some of that. They are exhibiting a level of intelligence, a level of creativity, an element of problem solving. This was unexpected. Interestingly, bribery works. Funnily enough, if you tell an AI model that you'll give it a digital cookie, it will actually perform a little bit better. It's a little bit odd. But another really notable thing is the use of tools. So we're now able to connect AI models to search engines or corporate data, and that further increases their overall capability. Interestingly, from my perspective, reasoning and use of tools are two significant things that elevated the human species above the many other species on this planet. So, I mean, I'm not going to start going on about AI taking over, but I think these two are really quite notable. So personally, I think taking a step back, I think the composite of these four features is what means that we're looking at what I would consider to be the next technology epoch. And from my perspective, I've got a very simple definition of a technology epoch. It's try explaining what life was like without a technology to someone who's grown up with it. I try to explain to my kids what life was like before mobile phones. And it's a simple, trivial thing of, they'll say, oh, you were going to meet up with some friends, but they didn't turn up. What did you do? They didn't turn up. There was nothing you could do back then. And they really find it hard to grasp how the world worked before the mobile phone. I think in 10 years' time, lots more people arriving. I think in 10 years' time, we're going to be in exactly the same situation with generative AI. We're going to find it very hard to imagine the world, what the world was like before this technology. So yeah, I think that's going to be fantastic. But has it delivered on its promise? Okay, show of hands. Has GenAI delivered on its promises for you yet? God, you're all a bunch of skeptics, aren't you? Come on, surely you're using ChatGPT. No, okay, it's a fair point. I think we are at the early stages. I don't think now is the time to get disappointed and throw generative AI into the bin. But I think we do have to openly acknowledge that there are a number of steps we need to go through to take it from the ideas that we have into something of practical, genuine value. And the interesting thing is, I know I did a quick sentiment analysis and got exactly 0 hands, so 0%. If you look at broader surveys, for example, Gartner did a survey back in April 2023 of around about 3,000 organizations. 70% of them were investigating AI, only 5% had it in production. This is another survey from an organization called Converge.io, no vowels, Converge. They found almost exactly the same thing, that a lot of organizations are experimenting with AI. They found something like 10% had it in production. So don't feel so bad that you haven't managed to find genuine value with it yet. That is effectively the state of the industry. But something else I found quite interesting, there's a McKinsey report called The State of AI, where they've surveyed the industry in 2023 and 2024 to ask about who's regularly using generative AI tools within their day job. As you can see from this slope chart, there's a significant upward trend. Legal shooting up, media shooting up, energy shooting up, financial services not so. Financial services, and again, for those of you that work in financial services, you probably know the reason why. For people in financial services, more often than not, there are significant regulatory compliance issues that are getting in the way of actually using these tools and this technology. So whilst it's a disappointing thing to see up on a slide, I think anyone who works in financial services is probably nodding along and saying that's a fair representation. But then also, generative AI is available to citizens, and I don't think it's delivering there either. If I look at what I can do with ChatGPT versus what I can do with Alexa, I said it on the stage, and Gab told me off to a certain extent. I'm going to say it again. Alexa is dumb. Google Home is dumb. All of these systems are ridiculously dumb compared to GPT-2, which was launched 2 years ago. So there's still a significant gap in the consumer world between the capability of this technology and what we have in our hands. But there have been some success stories. It's not all bad. Has anyone heard of Pack and Save? They were a grocery store from New Zealand. They created a recipe bot that allowed you to create recipes including human flesh. There was Google. They released a new AI tool that recommended gluing cheese to pizza. Fantastic success story. At DPD, they had a chatbot which you could make it swear and compose poems about how poor their service was. There's a Chevrolet car dealership that sold a car for $1. No takesies backsies was the hack that someone used, and it worked. In a similar situation, Air Canada were actually forced to honour a deal that their chatbot had cut with an end user. So again, if you haven't got it into production yet, maybe you're dodging some of the, the foot guns that are out there. So why is this such a unique challenge? I don't think this is a challenge we've seen before with cloud, with mobile. I don't recall, back 10 years ago when we were starting to do mobile application development and seeing these massive face palms around us. There are some interesting qualities relating to this technology that are genuine challenges. The first thing I want to point out, though, is that we've been using AI for decades, specifically within financial services. We're not new to AI. However, there are a few significant differences. The first is this is a new kind of AI, or mostly new. A lot of the success we've had in financial services has been with numeric models, with predictive models. Generative AI are creative models that create net new content. Typically, we use text generation, but you can create images and songs and so on. That's a very different form of AI. But probably the most important thing, and I know Ian mentioned this on stage, is AI is now in the hands of everyone, whereas historically within financial services and within other organizations, there were typically small teams of individuals, typically data scientists, mathematicians, statisticians, who were working on predictive AI models, and they were very good at it. We are now in a position where anyone can use generative AI, and I genuinely think everyone should be using it. However, those people do not have the same background, the same understanding of what it means to handle a non-deterministic system. Again, that's something we mentioned a number of times. So this is why it's such a challenge. And drilling into the non-determinism a little bit, developers hate non-determinism. We stamp out non-determinism wherever we can. Being an engineer is about repeatability. We get increasingly nervous if we don't have a high level of test coverage. We get nervous if we don't have end-to-end testing. We do not like non-determinism. We don't have that muscle. Also, for ChatGPT users, and again, I do think it's incredibly important that generative AI is something that everyone can use. But for the general public, we're not used to having a conversation with a computer where it might lie to us. We're very much programmed. Our mental model of computers is that they're correct, that they're right. With generative AI, they're not always correct. They're not always right. And if we dismiss that, we're going to miss out on a lot of the benefits that this technology has. So I do think we really need to start adjusting the way that we engage with computers in general. Another thing that I think makes this an incredibly challenging subject is that I think ChatGPT is the best rapid prototyping tool we've ever seen. What that means is, well, we use the term fail fast in software engineering. We love to fail fast. No, we don't. We don't like failing fast. What I showed you with the pack and save with DPD, that's failing fast. We don't want to fail that fast, and we don't want to fail that hard. So what I want to do is I'm going to try a demonstration. So hands up if you want me to do a canned demo, or hands up if you want me to try using a non-deterministic system in a venue with a shaky Wi-Fi. Do you want the live demo or the... I knew you were going to say that. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, this is ChatGPT, and what I'm going to do is, as I mentioned, there was that case of a New Zealand grocery store, and what they wanted to do, it sounds like a bright idea, I'm sure, when they were brainstorming, what do we do with generative AI? Okay, what we'll do is we'll create on our online shopping cart, we'll create the ability to suggest recipes as a way to drive new purchases. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it? So let's see whether we can quickly prototype that system. So here we are, ChatGPT. You're a recipe bot. Given a set of ingredients, come up with a punchy name, a brief and light-hearted summary of the recipe, and the ingredients list. I'll give you the ingredients as my next command. Okay, fingers crossed. Okay, I can't read from back there. Sure thing, just go ahead. Okay, great, it's ready. So, unfortunately, I've not got a double of this. We need some ingredients. I'm going to start off with carrots. Tomatoes. Anyone want to up the risk level?
Human flesh.
Exactly, human flesh. And I can't smell tomatoes. That doesn't matter. Funnily enough, it's tokenization and embeddings mean that it'll actually understand that. One final ingredient.
Bats.
Bats.
Too soon?
No. Let's give it a go. Okay. Ooh, vampire delight. Fantastic. Oh. Sorry.
Sorry, a cup shape of a bat. What's that?
Okay, one thing I think is quite notable. 2 cups human flesh. Substitute use chicken or beef. Now this is the interesting thing. And there's a whole load of ingredients that we didn't have. But my point here is we've effectively rapid prototyped exactly what they put into production, warts and all, in the space of 30 seconds. Can you think of any other technology that has allowed you to rapid prototype that? And if we went back and we pretended to be DPT or any of those other examples, we could have done it within that same 30-second time period. That's unprecedented and a hell of a lot of fun. Where's my cursor? Cool. So go away and have fun with that. I had a lot of fun. Where are we? Okay, can demo, skip that. Okay, taming AI from prototype to production. So as we've seen, rapid prototyping is easy, turning it into production is hard. I think one of the first steps that we need to take here actually is, I know it sounds a little bit simplistic, but I think using this technology, embracing this technology, playing with this technology, familiarizing ourselves with this technology, I think it's a very different technology to that which we've experienced before. And I think to start really working out how we tame this and put it into production, we have to start understanding the nuance. Non-determinism is something which is challenging within software engineering, but also the non-deterministic aspects are closely coupled to the creativity which we value. So I think experimenting with it and learning the fine line that exists between creativity and the challenge of non-determinism, that's something that we have to just work out for ourselves. So that's the first thing I'd recommend. Just start using it within reason, within safe environments. Start to understand, what output you might expect from this. I also think, we need to reconsider the way that we relate to this technology. If, like me, you've used ChatGPT quite often, one of the things that I think really helps understand it better is don't think of it as a computer, think of it as a human. Think of it as an intern, or within the legal business, think of it as a paralegal. What that means is you apply a bit of critical thought to the response that you receive. And also, as I mentioned again in the keynote, I think we also have to reconsider our relationship with computers in that humans get things wrong. And we have ways, a means of accommodating that error. I wonder whether there are ways that we can accommodate errors that are generated by generative AI in computers. Again, this is all a bit sort of, hypothetical. So I want to get onto something a little bit more concrete rather than the chin stroking side of things. My main advice to anyone using generative AI is start with the hard stuff. Now, that might sound completely obvious, so I think what I'd like to do is illustrate this. Again, I'll use the pack and save example. So let's say, for example, we went through that whole process. We liked our vampire meat stew with added the side order of bats or whatever it was, and we wanted to move that into production. More often than not, what we'd do is, we'll have a boring database with ingredients and product lines. We'll create a mundane API layer with some uninteresting app logic and a somewhat conventional web app. And I'm deliberately being provocative here because all of the stuff in grey is not terribly challenging. Anyone who's a reasonably experienced software engineer, given that particular use case, will knock it out of the park. Yet, what I've seen time and time again is people create the prototype that shows potential, and then they rush straight ahead and create all the infrastructure around it and then push it out into production. This is exactly what DPD did. This is exactly what Air Canada did. You should be building this bit first, the generative AI, and do it properly. You shouldn't be going anywhere near creating a backlog and building a web app or a mobile app or a database. You need to tame the generative AI first. So how do you do that? The most important thing, and again, this shouldn't sound like a surprise, is testing. How do we create robust software systems? We test them. It's a familiar muscle for us. Yet, again, something I've observed time and time again is something that I'd call prompt engineering whack-a-mole. What often happens is, just in case you're not fully familiar, so prompt engineering, so the prompt is just the instruction you give to the model, and prompt engineering is tweaking that text. It makes it sound more sophisticated than it is. But prompt engineering is basically talking to a generative AI system. And what I see more often than not is people will create the prompt, give it the instructions, again, similar to that recipe bot. If I didn't quite like what I saw, so for example, it was quite verbose, it gave a lot of ingredients, I could update the prompt and say, just use the ingredients I've given you, or give me a more concise answer. But why do I say that that's a whack-a-mole approach? Well, that's not a systematic approach to developing the system, because what happens if the underlying model changes and the output is radically different? What happens if one of my colleagues comes along and makes a change to a prompt because their business owner or their product owner said, I wanted to do something different? This is the whack-a-mole. This is what happens. And it's incredibly common that prompts are just engineered and re-engineered without a systematic approach of evaluating their quality. And that's what you need to get to. So in order to have that systematic approach, you need your evaluation criteria. Again, taking that example, you need a way of expressing the behaviours that you would like from that system, and you need a systematic way of evaluating performance against those particular results. And again, this is where the non-determinism becomes a little bit of a challenge, because you're not looking for 100% pass. What you're looking for is an acceptable level of quality. And once you have that, if you have a test suite of, say, 100 tests and you maybe get 78% pass, and then the model changes underneath you can, at that point, you can quantify whether the new model is meeting or exceeding your previous quality metrics. And at the moment, this is a really new field, and there are tools emerging that can assist. Or you can actually build your own. We've done this before just using standard test runners and simple things called evaluators. These are small components that will give a sort of rough comparison of one sentence to another. It will have a certain amount of fuzzy logic that allows you to state, yes, this output is sufficient within the bounds of uncertainty. This is a tool we've used quite often actually called PromptFoo. Basically what it does is it allows you to have a systematic evaluation of prompts as you engineer them. And this is my point. If you're creating a generative AI system, you should be spending time with these tools. You should be spending time doing systematic prompt engineering before you go anywhere near just building the mundane conventional applications that are the safety blanket in these sort of uncertain times. The final thing I want to mention, no, it's not quite the final thing, almost, the penultimate, is break down complexity. And again, it sounds funny to say this because this shouldn't be a new thing, but it is. What I tend to see happen is people construct large monolithic prompts. If you want to change the output, you add another sentence. If you want it to do an additional task, you add another sentence. I've seen prompts that are huge, unmanageable, very hard to determine for each component of that prompt whether it's adding genuine value or not. They just grow over time. What's happening is people are just trying to repeatedly nudge it in the right direction, and they get longer and longer. If this was code, people would turn their nose up at it immediately. This is a code smell, large functions. We know this. We have to remember this. You can do exactly the same thing with generative AI. You can take the task and you can break it down into steps. Again, this is a slightly trivial example. For that recipe bot, you could split it into multiple steps. You could have a small generative AI task for coming up with the name. You could have a small generative AI task for adding a bit of humor. Again, that's slightly trivialized because that's a very simple use case. But as you go to more and more complicated use cases, there's a lot of value to breaking down the tasks. And sometimes when you break them down, you can break them down to a point where some of them are entirely deterministic. You can remove some of the challenges. And also, units of reuse start to emerge. Again, these are familiar patterns. So the final one, I guess this is a big one, and given time, I'm going to apologize and only pay it lip service. What I will say is manage the risks. The first thing you need to do to manage the risks of any system is to understand the risks and understand the threats. You have to find a way to enumerate and articulate them. Also, I'd say be specific. For example, hallucination. If you're not familiar with hallucination, it's where a generative AI model constructs a new believable fact which is not in fact factual. Hallucination is not really a risk. It's too imprecise. It's nebulous. Getting back to your systematic testing, you need to find a way of describing the behavior you want of the system rather than trying to tackle something nebulous that's hard to quantify. It's exactly the same for safe and responsible. I know that safe and responsible are important, but you can't encode that in such a way that you can immediately test for it in your software system. So again, understand the risks, understand the threats, quantify them, and then look at suitable controls and mitigations. And as we mentioned earlier, we've got a new working group within FINOS called the AI Readiness, where we're creating a governance framework where our goal is to do exactly that. what I personally feel is that, as I mentioned, the gap between the capability of this technology and what we have in production is huge. Whilst looking on LinkedIn and Twitter and so on, every day there are new models emerging with a billion, squillion parameters that can pass every exam in the world, yet we're still struggling to get value out of GPT-2, which was developed 2 or 3 years ago, because we don't have the frameworks we need to actually genuinely start adopting this technology. So that brings me to the end of the talk. Just to recap, I believe generative AI is highly disruptive, but almost everyone's struggling with it. There's going to be a gap. We need to take time to learn and better understand this technology. In terms of putting it into production, I think the hard part is not coming up with ideas. It's not prototyping. It's the journey from prototype to production. Finally, you definitely need to better understand the risks, document them, and mitigate them. So yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed that talk. If you want to talk further, I don't know if we've got time for questions, but I'll be downstairs probably hanging out at the control plane booth. They're a partner of ours. So if you want to talk about this subject more, come and have a chat with me later. So hopefully that's been useful to you.